Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the previous lecture, we have talked about the metallic bond formation of metallic bond. In this lecture, we will talk about the intermolecular forces. What are intermolecular forces? The forces of attraction present between molecules of a substance are called intermolecular forces. It means that in between the molecules there exist the forces of attraction, and these forces of attraction are called the intermolecular forces. Now, the forces that hold atom in a compound are chemical bonds. When the two atoms are held together, they are held together by a chemical bond. But if the two molecules, they have a certain forces in between them, and these forces are called the intermolecular forces. In addition to these strong bonding forces, relative weak forces also exist between the molecules, which are called intermolecular forces. Now the chemical bonds are very strong, and chemical bond is formed in between the atoms which hold the atom together. So a chemical bond is very strong, but there is also weak forces between the molecules which are very weak, and these weak forces are known as the intermolecular forces. For example, if we take HCl. So H and Cl atoms are held together by a chemical bond, but the two molecules of HCl, in between the two molecules of HCl, there is a intermolecular forces which hold these molecules together, and these intermolecular forces are very weak. Now, types of intermolecular forces. So there are, we are going to study two types of intermolecular forces in your book, but all the intermolecular forces are collectively known as the van der Waals forces, and these are the following types. There are following types of intermolecular forces. So the first one is dipole forces, the second one is hydrogen bonding, and the third one is the London dispersion force. So the first one, we are going to discuss the dipole interaction. What is dipole interaction? The forces of attraction present between partial positive end of one polar molecule and partial negative end of other polar molecule is called dipole force. For example, look at here, there are two molecules of HCl. So the forces of attraction between the partial positive charge of one polar molecule with the partial negative charge of other polar molecule is called a dipole interaction. So dipole interaction is a type of intermolecular forces. They are weak type of intermolecular forces. They exist in between the molecules. Now look at the explanation of dipole interaction. They result from the attraction of opposite charges which may be temporary or permanent. These opposite charges, they may be temporary or permanent, and these dipole interaction are because of the attraction of opposite charges. Now the unequal sharing of electron between two different types of atom make one end of the molecule slightly positive and other end slightly negatively charged. So because of the unequal sharing of electron, because of the molecule is polar molecule, so one end of that molecule will be slightly positive and the other end will be slightly negatively charged. That is, look at here, the one end is positive and the other end is negatively charged molecule, because negatively charged, because that is a polar molecule. Now look at the third point. A shared pair of electron is drawn towards more electronegative atom. It is partial negatively charged. A is chlorine in hydrochloric acid. The other end automatically become partial positively charged. Look at here. A is the electronegative atom chlorine become partial negatively charged, and the other hydrogen atom become partial positively charged particle. Okay, the other end automatically become partial positive is the electronegative end is chlorine, so it become negatively charged. Now look at the fourth point. When the partial positive and partial negative charges exist in different positions in a molecule, the adjacent molecule will arrange themselves in such a way that the negative portion of the molecule come to near the positive portion of the molecule. Now look at here. There are attraction between the two molecules of HCl, and this attraction, because they are the molecules, so this attraction is very weak. This attraction is called the dipole interaction. Now in between the HCl, hydrogen and chlorine, there is a bond that is called a covalent bond, that is a strong bond, but in between the two molecules, that is shown by dotted lines, there are dipole interactions. Now look at the hydrogen and chlorine. The H is positively charged, the Cl is negatively charged. Now they will attract, the Cl will attract the positively charged hydrogen atom, and the H will attract the negatively charged chlorine atom, and in between the molecules this type of interaction is called the dipole interaction. I think that is enough for today. Now the dipole interaction, always remember that in between the atom there exists the chemical bonds, that is ionic bond, metallic bond, covalent bond, coordinate covalent bond, but in between the molecules there exist the intermolecular forces that I have shown you. The intermolecular forces are present in between the molecules, and in between the molecules, if the partial positive end of one molecule, the polar molecule, if the partial positive end of one polar molecule and partial negative end of other polar molecule is attracted, then these forces of attraction are known as the dipole interaction, and dipole interaction are very weak intermolecular forces. Thank you, class.